In this video we'll show how you can create a UX component that takes a list of addresses that define a route and plots those addresses as a route on a Google map, and also displays the distance and travel time between the various points on the route. So you can see here we have a route defined in this list control, and the route starts out in Lexington, Massachusetts, then goes to Burlington, Mass, Western Mass, and then Cambridge, Mass. So let's go ahead now and plot the route on the map. So you can see there's our route plotted on the map, and then for each segment of the route we have the distance and the travel time. So from Lexington, Mass to Burlington, Mass is 4.8 miles, 13 minutes. The next segment is Burlington, Mass to Western Mass. That's 15.1 miles, 21 minutes. And then finally we have Western Mass to Cambridge, Mass. That's 9 miles and 23 minutes. So we can also basically use drag reorder on this list to change the order in which this route is going to be computed. So let's basically change this route so that we start out in Cambridge. So we'll press and hold and then drag up to the top there. So you can see now we've moved up to Cambridge and the route has been recomputed. Now we're going A, B, C, D, and the times and distances have been recomputed. If we now decide we want to start in Western, so let's basically press and hold and then drag Western to the top, and you can see now we didn't quite get that to the top there, so let's go all the way to the top. And now you can see we start out in Western, then we go to Cambridge, then we go to Lexington, and then finally to Burlington. And then of course also at the same time that we compute the route, we've also got our driving directions shown over here. So each segment of the route has its corresponding driving directions with also the distance and the time. So let's take a look now at how this was all set up. So you can see here that we have a list control with the route on it, so we just have some static data here with an address field that defines the route. So the first stop on the route is right now is Bird Hill Road in Lexington, and you can see that the distance and time fields are currently empty because we're going to fill them in later on. So that's the definition of our list, and you can see we've also gone to the list and enabled drag reorder. So basically there's our drag reorder settings, and we've turned on drag reorder. So then the next thing you can see is that we have a button over here called plot route, another button called distance, and then we have our Google map itself, which is coming from our data controls over there. And then finally we have the placeholder, which is where we're going to display the driving directions. So let's start now with this first button, plot route. So this is button number 1, as you can see over here. So if we open up the builder for the click event here, we see that the first action is a Action Javascript action called Google Map Methods, and if we edit that we'll see that the method that we're calling is plot route, and this can basically either plot a route between two addresses, a starting and ending address, or between multiple addresses. So we've chosen the multiple addresses option, and then we need to specify the name of a JavaScript function that's going to return the addresses that define the route. So this get addresses function needs to return an array of addresses. We've chosen our travel mode as driving. Our units is default, which means we're going to be using miles because we're in the United States right now. And we've also specified that the driving directions should be displayed at the location defined by this placeholder. So let's now pause the video and pick this up in the next video. So we're continuing now to discuss how we can plot a route on a map where the addresses in the route are defined by a list control. So we can see here that the JavaScript function that returns the list of addresses here is called get addresses. So let's go and take a look now at the definition of that function. So over here we see get addresses, and what this function does is it gets a pointer to the list control. Then it basically gets all of the data in the list. So this underbar data now is an array with all of the data in the list, and then we basically loop through this array, picking out the address field from the data and pushing it into an array. So by the time this loop over here completes, this array here, ARR, contains all of the addresses from the list. So in other words, basically this ARR array contains this value, this 14 Bird Hill Road, Lexington, then 70 Blanchard, then 67 Shady Hill, and finally 36 Bigelow Street. So having done that, we can see now that our function that plots the route is defined on button number 1. And then we have another button over here called distance. And if we look at this button, we can see that this also uses an action in Action JavaScript. This time the action is get distance and travel time between points. So that's one of the actions defined in the list of available actions. And again, we have the option of getting the distance and travel time between 2 points, either a start and end address or multiple addresses. And again, if we choose multiple addresses, we must specify the name of a JavaScript function that will return an array of addresses. And we'd like to get the driving time and the travel time, and the distance for driving as opposed to for walking or bicycling. And then finally, basically, because this is an asynchronous action and it takes some time for Google to compute the travel time and distance, there's a callback function that you can specify. So this callback function gets called over here once the Google Map method has completed, and you can see that in the callback function we have access to an array called data, and this array basically has the distance and travel time for each of the segments of the route. So if we look at our list control, we'll see that our list control has 4 rows over here, which means that the route has 3 different segments. The first segment is Lexington to Massachusetts, the next segment is Burlington to Weston, and then the final segment is Weston to Cambridge. So if we go back to our action over here, we can see that we have this array called data, and this array is going to basically have in it 3 items. Each item is an object that has these properties: distance text, which is the distance as a string using the units that are specified, either miles or kilometers; distance value, which is just a number in meters; then duration text, which is a string; and then duration value. We also have total distance and total duration, which is the entire trip. And then you can see what we're going to do now is take these values from this data array and push them into the list control. So the first row in the list that we want to update is row number 2, because row number 1, which is row 0, since the data is 0, is indexed with a 0-based index, the first row that contains a route is the second row. So we're going to loop over all of the rows in data, and then we're going to basically update row 2, then row 3, then row 4 with the travel time and distance of that segment of the route, and then finally we're going to repopulate the list control. So this is how we get the data into the list control after we have computed the distance and the travel time. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video. So we're continuing now discussing how we plot the route between various points in a route definition on the map, and how we compute the distance between the points and the travel time. And we've showed over here how we can update the list control with the distance between the points and also the travel time. So if we look at this button over here, you can see also, by the way, that we're computing the travel time for driving as opposed to walking or bicycling. And we've chosen imperial units, which is miles as opposed to kilometers. So you can see now that this action is defined on button number 4. And finally, you can see that when we rearrange the rows in the list, the route gets recomputed. So I'm going to go there and say plot route, and then I'm going to move Cambridge, which is this D, to the top of the route. So I'm going to press and hold and then drop it over there, and you can see now Cambridge is the first item in the list. So the way that we forced the route to get recomputed was on the drag end event, we basically execute the code in button number 1 and then button number 4. So let's go take a look now at this list control and go over to list properties and then go to the drag reorder settings, and you can see that in the on move end JavaScript, the first thing that we do is execute the code in button number 1 by clicking that button, and then we execute the code in button number 4. So we could also have defined these two actions in a Action JavaScript over here, and then we would have just played those actions. But we chose to put the actions on buttons. So what we've shown in this video is how you can use Action JavaScript to automatically display a route that is defined by rows in a list control on a Google map, and how you can also display the distance and the travel time between the various points in the list. Thank you very much for watching.